Hello, my name is Paul Wilkinson, and I'm here with Richard Scott of ArcDesk to talk about unifying business and enterprises and the role of construction technology, or Contech, as an enabler. We'll be talking about how to scale that technology and how product and technology roadmaps impact success. Rich and I have both been in the industry a long time. We've known each other for a decade or more. We'll try to keep this conversation light and conversational, interesting and informative, and hopefully a bit thought-provoking. If you have any questions, please ask them. We have an open question forum on the platform that we're using. And if we don't get to answer all of your questions, we'll follow them up offline after the event. So, Richard, we've been in the industry for a good number of years, and
probably something like 50 collective years between us.
Yeah, I mean, I position myself in the industry now as someone who arrived in the industry by accident in 1987, worked for consulting engineers and multidisciplinary practices before I began to move into construction IT about 20 years ago. And in that same decade, that's when we first met. In the 2000s. Right. We were on the cutting edge of web technologies and mobile technologies and so on. Do you want to give a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, so my journey in construction technology started around about 1999, just off the back of the Egan report, actually. And I've always been fascinated in technology, and just around that time, first generation mobile computers were on the scene. Palm Pilots, for those of us who are old enough to remember Palm Pilots, right? And yeah, I was given the opportunity to develop a field tool, essentially a snagging system that had some kind of mobile capability. I had a call from the MD of a Cardiff-based construction company, said, I want to put mobile computers on the construction site. So yeah, I think my claim to fame, if I've got one, is probably developing the very first mobile application used in a live construction environment on Palm OS. And yeah, that journey was a really interesting one. The start of that business, over 14 years, that product evolved quite significantly. We developed the market, evolved the product. The infrastructure changed significantly because, of course, Palm OS didn't last very long. Went on to Windows Mobile, and then Android and iOS and so on. And in 2014, I was able to sell that company. That company was acquired by Viewpoint Construction, who are, well known.
It was four projects and then part of Viewpoint, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's right. And then I started working for other organizations. So after 14 years working with myself, I started to work with Viewpoint, which was a fantastic experience, understood a lot about the other aspects of construction technology. And then I went to work with Think Project, and now I'm with ArcDesk. So yeah, I had quite a bit of experience across that time, and almost actually found some time to have a little crisis of mental health as well during that period too. So I know it's very important in the construction space to talk about mental health. So we'll give it that call out now. Always look after each other.
Yeah, well-being has to be a priority in our sector. We talk about unifying business or integrating business processes and the role that construction technology can play in that. How it can help businesses scale and why roadmaps are important. I mentioned those earlier. What do you think about business? What would you define business unification as, and where would an organization looking at unifying its processes, where would they start?
I think when you think about business unification, it's really about breaking down the barriers between different functions and different departments so that the whole organization can start to act as one sort of interconnected ecosystem. And I think when you start to think about that topic, it's really about interoperability. And interoperability, the sort of term has been around for a long time. It's normally applied to IT systems. And just
how would you define it?
I think in the simplest terms, it's the ability for two independent software systems to be able to connect and to be able to communicate and to be able to exchange information. And this can be done in a number of different ways with sort of different levels of sophistication. So, the ability for one computer system to connect to another one without human intervention and send information that can be read is one aspect of interoperability. That's actually called, I think it's called syntactic interoperability, right? But then that can evolve, and the ability for systems to send information and data to one another, and for them to be able to have the necessary understanding to interpret that information and do something with it is a more sophisticated way to think. And I think that's called semantic interoperability. And the interesting thing with semantic interoperability, I can send you information, you understand it, you can interpret it, you can do something with it, it's from a different domain, is that for that to work, you have to have a common information exchange model, something that both these systems reference in order to achieve that level of understanding. And that's really quite interesting, because we see that sort of, in other aspects of interoperability within industry today, which I think is quite interesting. So as well as technical interoperability, which is obviously essential, I think it's interoperability between departments and functions. And we're thinking about common business systems, shared data, and the ability to sort of unify that information and deliver business intelligence, which isn't just about the data and information contained within one function, but it's really a consolidation of all this information. This gives you the big picture.
I'm doing some work in the field of interoperability at the moment, and one of the ways in which we define interoperability is the ability to exchange and use information independent of the technology that was used to create it. So that information is sufficiently open that it can be used by multiple solutions. So we try to take the technology dependency out of this and become more information centric. But we're picking on a problem that's arisen because of the nature of how our tools developed. We developed architectural technologies for architects. We developed estimating tools for estimators. We developed accounting tools for accountants. But we didn't necessarily make the connection that the information that an architect might specify that is then used for estimation and is then used for calculating invoices and so on, might all need to be exchanged.
Exactly. And I think there are a lot of aspects and pressures within the industry today that are making that even more important, that ability to share information between departments and for different departments to be aware of the function and operation of the departments around them. We talk to customers and the industry almost every day, and it's clear that the subject of the moment is really about interoperability. Everybody wants to break down these silos. Everybody wants to be able to see information from different places and bring it to one place, aggregate it together, and create some kind of synergy. But it's really interesting, the whole interoperability, even though it's applied generally to computer systems, I think it works in other aspects of construction generally. Between construction phases, for instance, if you think about the way that the RIBA have broken down construction phases and how information needs to move between these phases and be understood.
You're talking about the plan of works here?
Exactly, yeah. And new initiatives like EIR, the exchange information requirements, which are meant to be sort of established and set out right at the start of the project, right at the very first stage, and create the tempo and the definition for the data that needs to be managed all the way through the project and even handed over and used within operation. And even in supply chain, interoperability within construction is probably it's an essential aspect of being able to deliver successful outcomes. Back in the days of the Egan report, he was talking about integrated supply chains, right? And almost sort of beginning to suggest aspects that we now consider to be sort of golden thread, right? How do we carry this information, this data, all the way through the construction life cycle, almost cradle to grave? And now we've got, MMC, new methods of manufacture, design for manufacture. This whole kind of topic of can construction act and function like a manufacturer is a really interesting sort of area to discuss. And, we've also got a very, very well-established productivity problem inside of construction, right? And I think this comparison between construction and manufacturing is really interesting, because if you look at automotive, you see there's been massive transformations in quality, and you look at construction, and it's not quite there. All right. I think although over the last 20 years there's been a huge improvement in productivity and digitalization within the construction space, in comparison to other industries, we still fall far down.
I think McKinsey, several years ago now, produced a series of surveys looking at digitization of different industries. And their American survey, which is probably the most well-known one, because it indicated that construction lagged every other industry apart from agriculture and hunting.
And I believe that's still the case.
The European version of the same Digitalization Index put in construction rock bottom. I've been at an event recently where one of the speakers compared our industry to where the film industry and the graphics sector was 20 years ago, before they introduced open common standards that they could all use in their business workflows and so forth. So we are in the process of having to catch up. But we're in the fortunate position in some cases that many of the technologies which are tried and trusted in other sectors are available to us now to use and deploy with confidence, because they've already been tested and proven in those other sectors.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, and I think we've got a lot to learn from other industries. I think it's really interesting as well, emerging technology. The technology landscape has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. And, we're now looking at BIM, almost become a sort of well-established concept. Maybe it hasn't got the traction that we'd expect to have, but it's not going away for sure. Reality capture and IoT and other aspects of data which are important to the whole, all right? And how do we interoperate with those as well?
I mean, I think that we're maturing as an industry. We've had 10 years now since the launch of the UK government BIM drive. So building information modelling has become intrinsic to many parts of the supply chain, but it's by no means yet universal. I'm involved with the UK BIM Alliance, and we're having conversations within the Alliance. We had them at a trade show recently where we were talking more about information management, taking away the focus on just purely one aspect of technology and broadening it out. But interoperability still remains at the core of that. I'm involved with the Government and Industry Interoperability Group and developing at the moment, as part of my work with that, a code of practice for interoperable information to cover the whole life cycle. So it's not just about that construction phase, but it's enabling that process from the early stages of conceptual design and specification, EIRs, right the way through beyond commissioning and handover, right through the operational life for facilities management, asset management, and so on. So, we have some major challenges, but let's just move on a bit. From your perspective, what does the landscape look like now, and how well equipped are we as a sector to deliver on the promises of interoperability?
I think that's a really interesting one. We touched on it earlier on, right? I think when I started to work with the construction sector, which was sort of early 2000s, I started knocking on the door of UK construction around about 2000, 2001, after doing some development work. And, almost everybody that I spoke to at the time said, well, we've just finished putting in our accountancy systems, our back office accountancy systems. That was almost the first wave of technology adoption in construction, I think. And we just thinking about, or we're in the process of putting in our document management systems. I think they were called CDEs at the time. They were DMSs, weren't they? EDMSs. And the idea of using mobile technology in the construction space was like, whoa, you're ahead of your time. Come back and talk to me in a couple of years' time. There were some early adopters, and we
had the same resistance in the sector when social media first came in. People were resistant to even allowing their staff to share information online. Yet now it's become almost vital that people share information online.
I think the key point is here that the vast majority of very well-established systems that are used inside of the construction space are quite old, all right? They've well-established, they're well-respected because they do a fantastic job. But I don't think they were designed, the design of that product 20 years ago didn't really think about interoperability, right? As you touched upon earlier on. So I think it's a case of, how do we catch up, right? Because these systems, these well-established sort of, tier one, gold-plated, gold standard systems aren't going to go away. So how do we allow them to communicate? And there are a lot of technologies and a lot of companies looking at how you do that. And there are a lot of different ways, I think what we're looking for is this idea that sort of, as you say, the accountancy system understands cost, right? But it has no concept of quality. The quality system understands compliance and defects, NCRs, but it has no concept of delivery schedule. How do we bring these things together? And there are quite a few ways to do that in terms of communications, and I think that's the challenge that we have today.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think we should move on to the next topic, which is really talking about. I think you were alluding to this just a minute ago. It was about platforms. Yeah, I've been writing quite a bit about the platform approach. Some firms are positioning their portfolio solutions as a platform. They're working in some cases with partner businesses to create an ecosystem around their core solutions. So where do you see the role of platforms in helping businesses unify their processes?
I think platforms are almost essential, but it's a word that everybody uses, right? It's everywhere. If you walk through a construction technology event, you'll see platform all over the place. And I think it's useful perhaps just to sort of bring that back to basics and help the audience understand, what a platform is and why it's so special. And everybody's got a platform in their pocket, right? Everybody's got a mobile phone. And this is essentially a platform. What makes it a platform? Well, it's been developed to allow other vendors to be able to create applications that can plug in to this platform. It's either Apple iOS or it's Google Android or it's something else. And for those applications to seamlessly connect with other applications around them in a way that doesn't involve any kind of interaction from the user. Now, we've all seen this, right? So imagine you receive emails on your mobile phone, right? And you can choose what email client you want to use, all right? There are plenty of them up in the App Store. You can pick the one that you like, and you can plug it in and it'll work. And you don't have to do anything to make that work. You can use a calendar application. You can choose many calendar applications. You can plug them in and it works. And it's the same with satellite navigation, right? Sat-nav. Remember the days when you used to have a real sat-nav on the windscreen of your car? You can choose a satellite navigation application, Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever it happens to be. But where the magic is and what the platform does is allow these applications to work seamlessly. So I receive an email with an invite to come and talk to you today. And that invite is automatically put into my calendar, irrespective of the calendar that I chose to use. And this morning, when I get into the car and I look at my calendar event, it says, would you like me to navigate you to the location that you go into? All right. And I haven't had to do anything. I haven't had to configure how these applications work. They understand the data. They understand the protocols that the platform has defined. And it works just like magic. Now, just imagine that scenario in the construction environment, right? Where different applications can plug into a platform and they can immediately coexist. It doesn't matter which CDE you plug in. It doesn't matter which BIM view you plug in. These things just work. How does that happen? How does the magic work? I think that's really about standards in terms of data and the way that you communicate, and standards in terms of protocols and understanding how communication happens.
I think protocols is a good word to use. I mean, if you think about how the World Wide Web and the internet work, that's based on global agreements about standard protocols, open standards which are created and shared, and which enable the global sharing of information and the flows of information right across the internet in a way that we would never have envisaged when I first started in the industry back in the 1980s. So it is important to think about the value of open standards from my point of view, because I think there is a danger that sometimes you can begin to think, oh, we've got everything proprietary, and all the proprietary things talk to each other. But you forget that on occasion you'll be dealing with a supply chain who are using different solutions. Exactly. And on the next project, you might be dealing with a slightly different supply chain, again using a different complexion of solutions. So I think it's important to move away from a focus on proprietary standards to be thinking about more open standards that enable the free flows of information. Just as the World Wide Web does, we'd love to, in construction, to have those free flows of information that mean we become information focused rather than technology focused, or concentrating on the latest and greatest funky technology. It's got to be about the information. That's the important bit, not the device or tool that we use.
Exactly. And the whole platform paradigm is evolving as well. So, platforms can work in a couple of ways. You can take independent, best-in-class software solutions and connect them into a platform that almost acts as a kind of mediator and translator that says, okay, I know how to talk to CDE, I know how to talk to a BIM model, I know to talk to a cost accounting system. And, we plug them in and this creates a connection. That's one way to deliver a platform. There are ways to interconnect using other techniques as well. But there's also this concept of a single source platform, and that's where ArcDesk is positioned. A single source platform is essentially has all the characteristics of a platform as we described there, but it also builds these applications it almost has an application suite as well as the platform characteristics. So within ArcDesk, for instance, we manage project cost, budgets as a domain. We manage aspects of BIM as a domain. We manage aspects of scheduling as a domain, but they're all built into our product. That's called a single source platform. It shares the same database, which means that all this information is all in one place, and it can be surfaced and it can be delivered as business intelligence, very easily and very quickly. So there are a couple of different ways to look at platform propositions, but it's all about interconnectivity and it's all about synergy. And I think, the magic happens when, you have two or three sort of domain-specific applications working together, but the output is greater than some of the parts, right? And this is what we're looking to achieve.
Looking for synergies, aren't we?
Exactly.
I'm conscious of time, and I see we've had one or two questions coming in.
Fantastic.
So before we turn to those, and I get your response to some of those points being raised by the audience, let's just do a little bit of future gazing.
Yeah.
What do you think are going to be the key trends that businesses will need to pay attention to over the next 10, 15, 20 years?
I think this is really, really interesting. I think at the start of my journey in construction technology, it was clear that culture is a big challenge within construction in terms of adoption of new technology. So I think we're going to need to focus on the culture of the organization in order for this technology to really be able to deliver on its promises. But then if you look at the technology itself, the landscape has transformed incredibly, all right? So, artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, these things may seem like sort of, technology of the future, but they're here today. They're in your pocket, right? Mm-hmm. If you go to your photo album and you search for cat or beach or snow, Google or Apple will give you all your pictures of cats, snow, and beaches, right? Yeah. So, this is happening within the construction domain as well. As sort of reality capture, photogrammetry, robotics, sensors, LiDAR, point clouds this data starts to come from the site through this, it's high technology.
I think it's also important, as we're future gazing, also to be thinking about the pressures on the sector, the changes that we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years alone through COVID and the push to enable people to work remotely. Mm-hmm. We suddenly became huge converts to Zoom and Teams meetings in a way that we would never have had if there hadn't been the crisis of COVID. And it's brought about a recognition that technology can be a powerful enabler. Mm-hmm. But we also need to be thinking about some of the big picture items as well. It's about climate change and some of those big challenges that we face as society, and using technologies and using data and information enabled by those technologies to address those big issues.
I think just to close on that point before we take some questions, I think it's clear today, and we've seen this, right, that the demands and the pressures on the construction sector to handle more and more data and information and data that they never had to think about before. All right, if you think about sort of value procurement, construction playbook, all of these initiatives, right? They're asking for information about supply chain, locality. They're asking for information about ethnicity. They're even asking for information about the wellness and well-being of your staff on site, which I applaud. This is information that's just never been asked for before. So I think, our industry is going to adapt. I think we have, a new generation of digital natives who are taking up senior positions. These people expect things to work. They've not been without the internet and without mobile devices. They don't know another world. So I think, that combination of the changing culture, new generation, emerging technologies, and some, really leading, cutting edge technology is going to be really exciting sort of, foundation on which to build the next few years. And I'm sure we're going to see that productivity go through the roof in terms of construction.
We've got a question that asks, what journey do you often see companies going to with respect to the level of interconnectivity? Where are they on their journeys?
I think right now, it seems to me that most of the companies that I'm talking to, or we are talking to, ArcDesk are talking to today, are focused. It's really interesting as well, because it seems to have come the most important factor of the last 24 months. All right, we know we have siloed, independent, unconnected systems that do a great job, but the demands in our business now need us to do more. We need to think about it as a whole. We need to think about it as an interconnected system. I think that, in terms of being able to solve that problem, and a land and expand sort of approach is really important. You're not going to change everything overnight, right? The technology might enable that, but the people just won't be able to take it on, right? So find a point within the organization where these two domains come together and where the ability for them to work in a synergistic way would add huge value to the business, and focus on that. Land and expand, just take small steps.
We've got a question also about the interoperability issues that relate to, for example, project costs, adding costs to projects. If I think back quite a few years now, there was a major study in the United States which looked at the impact of poor interoperability on facility owners in America. And they estimated the annual cost of facilities owners was something like $14 billion per annum. And so, these were significant costs in avoiding poor interoperability or mitigating the impacts of it, and also the delay impacts of the poor interoperability. So, how can interoperability improve project efficiency from your point of view, from an ArcDesk point of view?
I just think it allows the people who are spending time trying to bring together information in order to satisfy the demands of the executive or the strategic people within the organization who are looking at performance from a big picture perspective. It allows them to focus on doing the job that's important to them rather than doing the administration required to feed this information to the people that need it, right? It's about giving back time so that people can focus on the important things, which is often delivering the project well, rather than doing the administration or managing data or paperwork in order to provide the information to the people that need it. It's interesting as well, I think, what I've learned over the last sort of 20 years is the sort of the needs and the views of data at the tactical level, like the project manager, where the hard hat and the muddy boots exist, and the needs of the people in the C-suite who are looking at the business performance as a whole are very, very different. And whilst you can apply technology into a tactical level, that guy is interested in getting the job done quickly, all right? As long as I get the job done, it's been successful. Whereas, at the strategic level, it's, okay, I've gotten the job done, but I also have all of the data about how we got that job done in order for us to, look at it, analyze it, drill into business intelligence and do an even better job next time.
Right. We've also got a question that asks about the extent to which construction companies, how far advanced they are in developing a standardized data model.
Well, I think that's it feels to me that's outside of the realm of the construction companies, right? So there's organizations who are doing this today. And sometimes it can be quite contentious conversations, right? But you take IFC, all right? It's probably the only sort of common file format that we have within that domain, all right? So whilst it may not be great, it's the best we've got.
IFC is industry foundation classes, just for those who wonder what IFC stands for.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Apologies for that. Yeah, I can get a little bit technical sometimes. But I think that, there are organizations out there that are independent of the companies themselves who are trying to develop and drive these standards. You talked about it earlier on in terms of the work you're doing with
I mean, there are businesses which are taking IFC and they're developing open source tools. For example, I saw it at a trade show just 2 or 3 weeks ago. One of the American speakers saying, this is the platform of the future, where we take away the focus that we've had to date in the industry on products and technologies and become more information, more data centric, and use the power of data that can surface from using standards based tools.
I think the outcomes are consistent across all industries, right? We want to be able to make well-informed, data-driven decisions. And I think there's an interesting mantra of sort of, what gets measured gets managed. All right. So, I think when all these things come together, the industry needs to change. There's no question that the transformation that it can realize is significant. You have to look at the automotive and manufacturing. Other industries have taken digitalization to another level. And I think it's a really exciting time. You know, I'm really looking forward to the next few years. I think it's a really exciting time for construction technology and for the industry itself. And I'm really happy to be part of it.
Right. Okay. We're out of time. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the questions that came in. As I said, if we didn't get around to answering, we may follow up with some of those offline. And thank you, Richard, for your time this morning.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.